am I supposed to look? There?
You don't have to look at any of the cameras.
Okay, we're live.
Thank you. Good morning, everyone. We are opening the the City of Topeka City Council Social Service Grant Committee meeting. It is Friday, July 22nd at 10 o'clock in the morning. We're at the Law Enforcement Center. Want to call the meeting to order. The two other members of the committee, I'm Karen Hiller and I chair this committee. My colleagues from the council are on Zoom, so I'll let them introduce themselves if we can.
Hannah Nager, representing District 6.
Thank you. Brett? He's gone?
He's on there.
Brett Kell, please. Well, Councilman Kell must have stepped away for a moment, but Councilman Kell from District 5 is also on the committee. I do want to wait till he's there for us to proceed, so we can stall for a minute.
Can you hear me?
We can now, I think.
Karen, can you wave if you can hear me?
Can you speak up just a little bit? And we're just wanting to make sure you're fully there before we proceed with the meeting. Did we lose him? Well, unmute for sure.
He's unmuted and he's on here, but it sounded like his audio was very quiet.
Well, we could hear you, Brett. It wasn't very loud, but let's try again.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, thank you.
Oh,
Okay, so are we going to see you or just hear you this morning? Can you hear us?
yes, I can hear you.
Okay, let's
I
proceed
can see
then.
you. I just can't. When I go small screen, I can see you, but not big screen. For some reason.
Okay, well, when you do speak, just take your time and speak as loud as you can and we'll be good to go. There you are.
Okay.
All right, good. All right. Our first order of business is to, our primary purpose today, primary and only purpose really is to hear appeals from any of the agencies who submitted, who have questions about how their scoring went or are wanting to appeal. It sounds like we have a little bit of both. So first order of business quickly is to approve the July 8th meeting minutes. I would entertain a motion to approve.
Move for approval?
Second?
Second.
Thank you. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All right. Opposed, same sign. Minutes are approved. Okay. We have 3 applicant appeals. I think this is probably random, but the order that I have them on the sheet is NAMI first, then Pappin's Landing, and then Kansas Big Brothers Big Sisters. So if that works for you all, we'll simply go in that order. The committee is open to hearing whatever questions or issues you have. If it turns out you just kind of want to talk through how and we have both Brett Martin and Jessica Lenhair from United Way. They were the ones who had the expert panel who reviewed these applications and scored them. They have reviewed that prior to those scores and recommendations being given to this committee last month, or earlier this month, I guess. And so we are simply going with that. We have a preliminary recommendation on the table. There is a strong commitment to follow with the policies, procedures, priorities, and questions that were set and approved by, not only recommended by the committee last year, but approved by the city council before this RFP went out. So understand that sometimes this, if it turns out someone has uncovered something that really is wrong, we will talk about it as a committee. It would require going back in and taking funding away from someone else to make that change, so it's a big deal. If it turns out there's some just talking through and learning, often this turns out to be a very good process for new agencies or new directors to simply learn a little more about what the thought process was, what about outcomes, boards, output history, and so on. And we're happy to do that for you as well, because we learn a lot from your questions and your issues and learning as well. So however this goes, we're good to go. And with that, if you've got any questions about the process, just ask when you get up, and we'll go ahead and call NAMI Kansas up for the first appeal.
Well, first, thank you for the opportunity to come and speak with you. I think for us, we just wanted to plead the case as to what it is that we do and what the front porch means, and how it may not necessarily equate very well to quantitative outcomes and measurements. So the front porch, I mean, it's much like being behind the 6-foot privacy fence in your neighborhood, and nobody knows what you're doing, how you're doing it, what you have to offer to the neighborhood. And we decided we needed to do something different than that. And I'm going to go back to when I first learned about NAMI and NAMI Kansas. It was in January of 2018. At this point, my daughter, who was then 20, she and I had been on an 8-year journey of her mental illness. And in that 8-year journey, not one time did we ever hear anybody speak about NAMI. And as I started to research and know more about NAMI and NAMI Kansas, I came to the conclusion that I needed to apply for this executive director position that introduced me to NAMI in January 2018. And so I applied, and subsequently I was placed in that seat. In kind of June 2018, July 2018 is when I started. And so as I got there and I came to realize maybe why I didn't know anything about NAMI in that 8-year journey with my daughter, it was because we were sitting behind the 6-foot privacy fence. And there wasn't any opportunity for others to know who we are and what we do unless they wanted to take that opportunity to come to that downtown 4-story building that had no NAMI signage out front. We all know what parking is like in downtown Topeka at 5th and Jackson. And if they happened to find a parking spot and find the building and made it up to the 4th floor, again, no signage inside the building as to where we were and how to get to us. And if they made it up there, they were so filled with anxiety already just trying to find us. Anxiety about they couldn't find the building, anxiety that they couldn't find a parking spot, anxiety that they couldn't find us when they got into the building, anxiety that they wondered what was going to happen to their car because they parked in a space that said 1 hour parking only. That's when I realized we were behind the 6-foot privacy fence. And that's when I realized we've got to get out in front, out in the public, where people are doing life, where people are walking by on the sidewalk, so to speak, to learn more about their neighbors and who they are and what they're doing and how they can come alongside and help you with what's happening in your life. So that's where the front porch vision was created from. And so it's a very qualitative approach. It's being present in the community. We found that the best place for us to be present in the community was at the mall, where people are walking, where people are coming to shop, where people are coming to meet friends and family to maybe sit down and have a meal, or just to congregate, get their nails done, get a haircut, anything like that. We felt that that was the best place for us to go and to be that front porch and be present in the community. We moved in December 2019, and then 2020 happened with the pandemic. But we said, no, we're staying here, and we're going to stay present in the community. We did not shut our doors. The mall did not shut their doors, and we stayed consistent with the mall hours, and we were there and we were present. And we did have people coming in and asking, what do you do? What's NAMI? How can you help us? This is what's going on in our family. What are the resources out there that can come along and give us support as we walk this journey? And that's what we did throughout 2020. And we did it again in 2021. And we're doing it again in 2022. And we're not going to stop because we are seeing a difference, a qualitative difference about ending stigma, because we're out in the public eye. We're there, and we're not checking off data points when somebody steps into our office and asks us, what's NAMI? We're telling them what NAMI is. And then we're listening to them on what their journey is, what's happening in their lives, and what is out there for them in the city of Topeka that can help them on this journey. These conversations, these moments in time of listening are not data points in a spreadsheet. They're building relationships, and they're being present in that moment in that individual's life. I provided, I don't know if any of you received this, but I provided examples of different stories of people who have stepped into our office. Colton, young man in his late 20s, struggling with severe mental illness, schizophrenia, and depression. Colton's wife had passed away a few years prior, and Colton spiraled. And he landed in Topeka, and he was homeless, and he had nowhere to go during the days. So we welcomed him with us. He considered his time with us as his job. It made him feel worthy. It made him feel like he was contributing somehow, even in the midst of his illness. As we all know, being homeless can oftentimes lead to exposure of criminality. And one day, we realized that Colton hasn't been in this week. What happened to Colton? We contacted the pastor that we knew he was working with because of these relationships that we had built with Colton. And we contacted the pastor, and the pastor said, I have not seen him either. And so we contacted or went into the website to see, is Colton in the county jail by chance? And we found him there. And we let the pastor know. And the pastor then connected with Colton and continued that relationship with him while he was incarcerated. And then Colton shows up through our door, hair, hot mess, long, unkept, but he's clean because he's been away and off of the streets for the last 3 months. And he says, I want to get help. I want to get real help. I don't know what I need yet. I don't know what I want yet. But the first thing I know I need is a haircut. Is there any way you guys can help me get a haircut? And we said, absolutely. Took him right down to JCPenney's. Remember where people can get their haircut when they come in to the mall? We took him down to JCPenney's and we said, hey, can you guys get him in and we'll pay for it? And they said, absolutely, we'll do it right now. So they cut Colton's hair, and I'm just going to tell you, the glow on his face and his smile afterwards was just more than I can even put in words. And then we gave him some clothing that he needed, and then we started having the conversation. Colton, if there's one thing that you can have for Christmas, what might that be? And he said, I really need to connect with my family back in Oklahoma. I think if I made it back home to my dad, I think I can get on the right path. So we helped him get in contact with his dad because we have a desk there with a phone for our guests to use, and it's only for them to use. And he called his dad and had the most beautiful conversation with him. And his dad said, yes, Colton, I will get a bus ticket for you, and we will get you back here. Then we started, encouraged him then to work with the Topeka Rescue Mission so that he can get a state ID so that he can get on a bus and make it back to Oklahoma. And the day before Christmas Eve, Colton got on a bus and went back home to his dad. And we get letters from him letting us know how he's doing. That's the value of the front porch. In this document, I talk about the group of teen boys walking, and this is more about,
I'm gonna
yes,
slow you down a little bit because we did get the document. We got it
Okay.
in advance. So I assume that the council members have read through it and your stories. It's good to see you here and being part of the group. Not to diminish the stories, but pretty much every service that we have here, one way or another,
has that
Yeah.
impact on lives.
has that impact on lives in the
Mhm.
way that they particularly are connecting with kids or seniors or
Mhm.
housing or whatever it is. So if you could, I appreciate the time though, because it's always good to refresh that those stories are so strong. If we could talk specifically a little more, if that's what you came for, about the scoring.
About
Because
the
there is,
scoring.
this
Yes.
process was developed specifically, and really all the social services are in a similar situation to yours. It's hard to quantify, everybody's important, but looking at what the outcomes are, what we're planning to do, and what the steps are along the way, and how many people are being served and how many are achieving the outcomes that were in mind is part of what this particular grant process is about.
Absolutely.
So if we could target in, because the staff from United Way are here to help us and you answer questions. Did you by any chance, sometimes when agencies are new, they do some consult on the way in terms of preparing their application or even after the scores come out. Have you spent any time with
Well,
our
we are
vendor?
currently in our 2022
Okay,
grant award year.
okay,
And we replicated, because that's what we'll continue to do with the front porch. So we
Okay.
replicated that for 2023.
so you had a similar application, but maybe a different scoring team.
Perhaps so.
Okay, let's focus in on that if we can.
Absolutely.
And address to both the committee as well as the staff, and then we'll see what
Mhm.
we can do.
Okay. So on the score sheet category, outcomes are clear and related to identified needs. The score sheet comment was no way to measure what they put down in the first outcome. Need to reduce stigma, but need a measurable. And again, that's where it's qualitative. And the teen boys walking by laughing and snickering, oh, you're the one that needs mental health services. Why don't you go in there? And then finally one day, they walk in. You want to talk about ending and reducing stigma? That is a clear example of ending and reducing stigma. But how do you quantify that?
Let's
So,
let Brett
Yeah,
react to that,
so,
please.
on the application, it does say there's no way to, we have no instrument to measure the reduction of stigma in the community. So when the grant reviewers are looking at it, and there are zeros in the performance measure, and then there is an outcome that's tied to no instrument, they don't have any choice but to reduce the score, if that makes sense. While I recognize you have qualitative data, the way the grant is organized is around quantitative measures. And so, while you do have a lot of qualitative data, if there's nothing in here for them to measure, it makes it difficult for them to provide a numeric score, if that makes sense.
And there are ways, and if what happened this year was maybe an anomaly, or I don't know exactly how the one year to the next would work, but it is possible to come up with short-term and long-term outcomes and measure them.
The other way to think about that is to only report outcomes to the city of Topeka that are measurable. While you may have other work that you're doing, if you have a performance measure that doesn't have an instrument of measurement connected with it, and there isn't one available or there's no way to do it, my encouragement would be to not include that, because the grant reviewers only have what they have in front of them. And so if there's a zero and it's tied to an outcome that has no instrument to measure, their only recourse is to reduce the numeric score, because they don't have anything to go on, if that makes sense.
it does. So then if the only measurable outcome is the number, the head count, then that would be the only outcome we would report.
Correct. And then I would encourage you to look across national partners, regional partners, and look to find other programs that have quantitative measures related to some of the qualitative change that you're seeing. It's not impossible. I'm not an expert in mental or behavioral health, so I'm not connected with those, but it would seem to me that there could be some outcomes with tools, instruments to be able to measure, that may get to some more of the quantitative pieces that you're wanting to do, that you may be able to find from peer organizations that you could potentially use beyond the other two that you have listed here, so.
I get and I understand that completely. My concern, and I'm just speaking on behalf of NAMI Kansas and those that we serve, to become a data point is stigma inducing itself. So we're always very careful that that is not the driving force of the visit for the individual that's walked in or called or emailed. That they're not a data point in a database.
Sure.
But that they are an individual that is in need of service and care and just basically a need to be heard.
Sure.
So,
But what you're talking about is the need, and having been a nonprofit director and when outcomes were new and being steeped in that, for instance, if some of your goals have to do with connecting with people who have mental health issues and getting them exposed to services for the first time, educating them that that's available, that's a preliminary outcome. If generally when you're in an outcomes model, the next thing is action steps. you wanted them to take some action toward that. Those are measurable, and they're not impersonal. They're really a measure that that person did take steps. And then in your Colton case, appearing to live happily ever after, get everything resolved. A lot of times our services aren't in a position to track people long enough to learn those long-term outcomes. And so you have to look at what you can quantify so that it answers that ultimate question that was my favorite from some bad outcomes training and eventually getting some good outcomes training, which is, so what? Why are we even doing this? And the measures make sure that you're actually getting it done, that it's worth your time to be at the mall or whatever. Maybe when those numbers turn out small, you think, well, maybe we should do some additional outreach efforts. Where else could we go so that we're reaching more people with the same staff, or what, that the outcomes seem very impersonal, but they actually drive us to remember why we're there and make sure we're getting that accomplished for the people that are involved. And that's why some years ago now, at least at the city council level, the committee that looked at that decided that was the best way to go, because each of us is pretty passionate about every one of the things that everybody does. And so how do you sift that out to decide whether, at least in the case of the city, what the best place is to place those dollars that will get the most done, that will generate the most stories,
Right?
okay? Just to
Okay.
hopefully take the edge off that having numbers in there. That's why.
Got you.
Keep going.
Okay. The second one, score sheet category, applicant has achieved outputs and outcomes on prior grants per meaningful measures. This was a score of 10 out of 20, but there is no comment provided, so it's difficult to respond to the decision-making process behind why that decision was made. But all I can say is that in our current 2022 grant, we are meeting the outputs and outcomes set forth in the 2022 grant application and proposal. So what we listed in that, we're meeting those.
Juliet, I'm gonna have to have some help here.
You're gonna have to give me a second so I can look up everything, and then I'll let you know.
So the way it works on the outputs and outcomes is that, under that score sheet category, the score is 20 if 90% of the outcomes and goals are met, 75% 15 points if 75% of the outcomes and goals are met, 10 points if 50% of the outcomes and goals are met, 5 points if 25% of the outcomes and goals are met, and 0 if none of the goals are achieved. What we have also done in here is, because these are 90, 75, 50, and 25, if they exceed 25%, it moves to the 50-point score. If it exceeds 50%, it goes to the 75% score. And if it exceeds 75%, it goes to the 90% score. If it's a score of 10 out of 20, that would mean that half of the outcomes and goals are met. So I have 1, 2, 3, and then I have an output here. And it would appear that only 2 of the 4 would have been met, which would have been, one of them, of course, there's no scores at all, or there are no numbers at all, so that one would not be met. And looking at the second one here.
The one with no score, is that back to reduce stigma?
Yeah, it says no instrument to measure, and all the scores in, or all of the numbers in there are zeros. So that one wouldn't be met because there are no numbers in the piece. Juliet, do you have the second one that wasn't met of the 4? I'm counting 4 here. 1, 2, 3, and then an output.
I'm still looking through what Joyce sent me.
So there's typically not a comment there because it's typically whatever percent it comes to is what it is. So when we counted those, we had 4 grant reviewers and we sat down and looked at it. Let me see if I can, see if I've got it in my personal notes here. Here we go. So this is one that Audrey, because they were a newer applicant, they needed to contact, so they contacted the references. So if they didn't have numbers in specifically for a complete year, because they're a current grantee, which means they haven't completed the year, because by the time we start this process, we're not yet through the full calendar year. We don't have a year's worth of data. We contacted a reference that you gave us, and that reference, when we contacted them and were able to get outputs and outcomes, it showed that 50% of those were met. So that would have been a score of 10 out of 20. That's what I have in my notes here. What I don't have is I don't have those specifically in front of me, but it would have been half, which would have been 50% of the outcomes and goals are met from the previous year's data. Did you have any communication with Audrey
No,
or Juliet related to that?
no, I did not.
Because I've got references contacted here, and then I have a score written in here.
Can I see the reference?
I don't have it, that's what I'm
Okay.
asking for.
That may be something that needs to be followed up.
Yeah, we
One
can
of the
follow up and
reasons
get that specifically.
That the council, a couple of years ago now, decided to clarify that we wanted any applicant for these funds to have at least 2 years' experience with the program, was so that we could, that it wasn't brand new and that there could be some experience, and that the references, rather than just having to have city funds or no references,
Right.
that there were prior funders. So that may help
Yeah,
unpack some of that.
I just find that interesting because we exceed our outcomes.
Okay. I'd be more than happy to check that. All I have is the data in front of me that shows 50%, but I can check on that.
Mhm. Okay,
I'll check on that.
okay. Next one. Capacity, organization has the resources to produce outcomes efficiently and effectively. The score sheet comment, 48% of the funds are paying their rent. That's almost half. So, I mean, to have a front porch and be a welcoming and inviting space, you have to have a space to do that. And while, yes, it's 48% of the grant proposal request to Topeka Community Foundation, it really only equates about 2% of our overall budget.
That's a state NAMI's budget.
Yes, yes.
Yeah, so the 48% is related to what the 48% is of the funds that are coming from the City of Topeka grant. Is that correct?
48% of the, right, 48% of the Topeka proposal grant is for rent.
Correct. And so
Right.
there were a couple of things related to this with the grant committee. They mentioned this last year in comments, but it didn't come out as strongly as it did this year. The question is about the mall, and a mall that it is at a fraction of the capacity that it was years ago. As a place to be able to find people, they had a hard time and they weren't convinced that that was the place to go. So for them to have 48% of the ask to go to occupancy at a building that they're not sold on is actually getting to the people who need mental health services, that was behind the comment there. There were a couple of other comments scattered through here related to the front porch idea and not the idea of the front porch, but the idea of it being at the mall, of being where the people who need mental health services congregate, if you will. So for them, 48% of the budget to go to a place that they weren't sold on being a place where people who needed mental health services were gathering.
Mhm.
And so as a result, they scored, 3 out of 5? Was that the score there?
Something to that effect.
Yeah, so it would have been the second tier score.
Right, so 1 out of 5 people will have a mental illness in any given year. But the ripple effect tells us that 5 out of 5 people will be impacted by that mental illness. So if we have 100 people in the mall each day, then that's 100 people each day that have mental illness on their journey. Either it's them personally at 20, or it's a family member, friend, neighbor, coworker who has a loved one with a mental illness. So in reality, when you impose the ripple effect, it doesn't matter if it's 20 people, 100 people, or 400 people. Every one of them have an impact of mental illness in their lives,
So then if that's the case, you could actually be in any location.
right?
Okay. And I think for them, the point was going to a mall that's at limited capacity.
Mhm.
They just questioned that. So as a result, to have, again, as reviewers who are looking at being responsible for city dollars, that argument to them wasn't convincing. So
Mhm.
that's about all I
Right.
have on.
And then I guess at the same time, it would seem important that the city of Topeka and the leaders of it would like to see that mall become successful and to encourage and bring people to that location, whether it's to come to us or it's to go to the Shawnee County Youth Court or it's to go to Lens Crafters across the hall. Regardless, I would think it would be important for the city to see those individuals re-engaging the mall and bringing revenue into the city as a result of that. So, okay. Category, let's see. Score sheet category, organization manages program effectively. The score sheet comment, nothing on the website talks about the front porch, don't have any past program effectively. So we do have, on our website, we have a page that's specifically titled Front Porch, and a couple different ways by which to get to that. And it shows pictures of that space, and it is welcoming and inviting, and some narrative about why it's there and welcoming people to come, seek services, seek resources, get a book from the library, find out other resources within the community. So that one it's actually there on the website.
We had a couple of grant reviewers who weren't able to find it, so.
Okay. Category, agency has a formal process. Oh, wait, can I go back up to the comment, don't have any past program effectively? I mean, I just don't understand the context of that comment to even form a response. I mean, we've been around for 34 years. We've been providing programs and services.
So it gets back to an outcomes piece, being able to prove the effectiveness of the program in that location. They didn't find it convincing in the application that the front porch idea was highly effective. And again, they didn't have numbers for that either, so that's another piece.
Next one, agency has a formal process and is using client input. So the comment is process in place, but no mention of using them. Don't talk about client input. And perhaps this could have been better communicated in the application itself on qualitative stories and outcomes of those who come to the front porch seeking this help and access to health care. We listen to every individual who comes, and it's their input that drives what services we guide and direct and navigate them to. So it's 100% client input driven. We'll have to figure out how to better narrate that.
Looking-
Sounds like that. Do you?
I'm looking in your application to be able to find where that specific question is related to the use of client input. My guess is in the application and based on the conversation that I'm recalling that you talk about a process that you use to be able to hear from clients. You didn't make the connection between how that then shapes program, if that makes sense. So you talked about being able to talk to clients and getting their input, but then didn't talk specifically about how that shapes the program moving forward.
Or how that shapes how we help them navigate the system or provide the resources to them.
Correct.
Okay. Score sheet category, organization leadership is strong and maintains community-based representation. So it's challenging to respond to a score with no comment, again.
So that's in the score sheet. You didn't meet it on race, race and ethnicity.
Oh, okay.
So in the rubric, in terms of organizational leadership, at least 20% is made up of racial and ethnic minorities, is less than 70% of one gender, meets regularly with quorum of board members in attendance 80% of the time, and a healthy mix of needed skills and resources. That gets 5 points. If you met 3 of the 4 criteria, it's 3 points. And so you didn't meet on race and ethnicity, but you met on board attendance, mix of skills, and gender.
Okay, so that's more demographic driven than
Correct.
on board makeup
Correct. Board composition. yes.
and org. Okay.
Yeah.
And that concludes the areas of concern I wanted to bring up.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you for your
what
time.
you're doing and for coming.
Absolutely. So I'll check on the past, or on the reference piece. I'll pull that specifically and be able to tell you where we got the 10 out of 20 score.
Okay. All right,
For
thank you.
Thank you.
And I think that even if there was a minor change that would not affect
Correct.
the ranking on competitive scores. I think committee, unless somebody wants to do it otherwise, we'll go ahead and hear all 3 of these and then ask just once whether there is any sentiment from the group, whether we should change any scores. Is that all right?
I think that sounds appropriate.
Okay, thank you.
Yes, I agree.
Okay, let's have our next appellant up, and that would be Tappan's Landing Senior Center. I think she's online.
I am.
Okay,
I want to thank you all for the opportunity to come before you and speak and mostly to learn. I am new as of July 1st here at Tappan's Landing as the executive director, and this is my first appeal ever, so this is exciting. And I want to say this before I go any further. Juliet at United Way has so much patience. She's pretty wonderful. I mostly just wanted to, I know, I'm not going to treat this as an appeal so much as just a clarification. The demonstrated need was the first one, serving a community, doing it forever, and have survived. I'm not sure what that means.
Sorry.
I believe they were speaking highly of you, to be honest. They're talking about how you've been in the community for so long and you've still been able to survive through everything that's gone on. So it was more of a kudos type.
Okay. And then the budget, I'm not sure exactly what that was about, the comment about the budget, that the budget surplus. Nothing against the last director, but this is the case of the same format being put forward every year and a different committee reviewing it. And so next year it'll be a different it'll be completely different because it'll be someone else writing it. So I'm not sure exactly what was done here on this surplus.
So which application are you speaking of right now?
Or not emergency services, but, oh man, I am on the wrong thing. I am so sorry. The other one, the services for the elderly.
Okay.
I don't know why I even had that printed out.
So what was your question about the
I'm not-
surplus?
I'm not sure how you guys are reading this and how I should be reading it. Because this shows us as having this projected budget surplus, and that's not going to happen. So I'm not sure exactly how this form even works. Is this, have we put our total budget in there or something? And it looks like that's our surplus? I don't know if I'm explaining myself very well.
You're fine. I'm just
trying to figure
trying
out.
to gather everything and look at it.
Because I don't want this to happen again.
Right. Did you submit this grant yourself?
I'm not sure if I did or Debbie Lake did.
Okay.
She was the acting director then, so I didn't have a lot of input into it.
Because it looks like when you put in the revenue, you had all the projected. And then, of course, the city grant, if you received it, was there. Then Joyce might need to help me with how the data, how our EC impact sort of calculates everything. So I might have her jump on
Okay.
and explain that.
I'm looking at it. I just pulled it up, and this is for services for the elderly, correct?
Yes.
Okay. I wanted to make sure I was on the right page.
Yeah, I'm not gonna argue the other one. I tried.
I mean, yeah, the way that whoever put the information in shows that you do have a surplus. So when you have the volunteers who look at this, they don't have anything else to look at. So in their eyes, yes, you do have a surplus. So when we do this again, then, you know, give Joyce and myself a call and we can help you, walk you through this.
Okay. That is all I have pretty much. I'm not gonna sit here and try to beg you to change your mind or anything like that because it's not gonna happen. But I'm learning a lot. So I appreciate it. And I appreciate the help United Way's given us.
Yes. Yeah, definitely. Joyce and I are always here, and Audrey, she's also our new team member. We're very glad to help, so.
No, I'm glad you're there.
Well, and if
Thank
I
you.
can use this as an entree to say something that I had to not say last time because we hadn't disclosed anything. Your colleague Deb Dawkins at East Topeka Senior Center ran into the same things you are when she first took over, and she scored 100 out of 100 points this time.
Wow.
She's consulted and worked hard at the outcomes and the numbers and everything in there. So it is possible to totally ace it with some work. I'm really proud of her. Shout out to you, Deb.
I like getting 100% too.
There you go. I'm not sure we've ever had that actually, but I know how hard she's worked at that too. So for what that's worth.
And
All right.
Robin,
Yes.
on the 29th of September, I met with Debbie. Yes, and board chair, I'm sorry, your name? Kay, that's right. We met for a couple of hours. I've got my notes here from that meeting. We would be more than happy to sit down with you as well as a new ED and make sure that we make sure that you're given all the support you need to be able to make that transition and be able to get the technical assistance with an EC Impact to make sure you're getting the data in that you want to get in and the way you want to get it in there, so.
Thank
Okay.
you.
Thanks again and welcome.
Thank you.
One more, Eric Maydew, Big Brothers Big Sisters.
Yes, ma'am, I'm here. And I
Alright.
have Holly Laird with me, who is our grant writer as well.
Okay,
If you guys have any questions, we should both be able to answer those for you. Thank you for having us this morning. This is also our first appeal. So I guess I'll back what Robin said. It's exciting. I don't know if it is or not. But thank you for having us this morning. We wanted to clarify a few things that we saw in the application that have varied quite a bit year over year. And just wanted the opportunity to speak to those differences in detail, but then also ask questions on, how the committee was able to come out with these outcomes. So we'll start in section 1. Outputs are clear and related to identified needs. If we're paying attention to applications year over year, that's 2 less points than what we've received in prior years. And we use the exact same database and outcomes module to provide this information. So information wouldn't have changed year over year in terms of how we get it to you guys. And there was no comment. So if we could just get a little bit of clarification as to how the outputs were not clear or related to identified needs, that would be great.
Okay, let's take a look here. Looks like first output, 100 youth reaching their match anniversary and complete the survey during the grant period. And then you've got your outcomes, 90% will maintain or improve their scores. I think in the conversation that we had with the grant reviewers, in terms of the, I think the question was related to the output of the youth reaching their match anniversary. Yeah, Juliet and Joyce, what I've got in the notes here related to whether or not 100 youth reaching their match anniversary was a strong output. That's all I have in terms of comments. Joyce or Juliet, in your comments, do you have anything else?
Joyce, Juliet? No?
No? Okay.
No, I don't. I just don't think with the, like we have mentioned in the past, every year's we have different volunteers. So sometimes they look at the outcomes and the outputs and they may not think they're strong enough, I guess. But no, I didn't have anything listed.
Okay.
And I'm not sure.
That was one area that I thought there was a deduction in point and nothing changed in terms of our outcomes of reporting mechanisms. And so that
Yeah.
seems very subjective, which I understand happens with new committees every year.
Yeah.
But I think one thing for clarification is the youth that we're reporting on this grant are in specific areas. And so that is going to change year over year. That number isn't reflective of all youth served. Quite simply, it's reflective of those served in the territory that the application specifies, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
So while it might seem low, it's I think it's more of a clarifying question than it is this is low.
Right.
And that, for everybody, sometimes speaks to some clues, especially with the difference in how a panel might look at it in terms of what you would put in your narrative, right? To pop
Yeah.
that if.
I mean, without knowing who we're speaking to, that's difficult.
Right,
But
right.
Yeah, so the point values related here, outputs are demonstrated in detail and are achievable as 10 points. Outputs are general or vague, was 8 points. And so I think they felt like there could have been more detail given related to the outputs. The outcomes were obviously strong, measurable, and related to identified need. There was 10 points there, and there was more explanation related to educational success, socio-emotional competency, and risky behaviors, and how those, or the more specifics of those particular, of the COS and the YOS for the outcomes. I simply think they were looking for a little more detail on the outputs. I don't know if that helps.
That's what I had in my notes.
Okay.
So they would like more specific details on the 100 youth that reflects
Correct.
of each child?
No, just more specifics related to why, for example, the match anniversary, and likely a little more detail related to the youth, although you do talk about that in your activity, facing adversity and one-to-one mentoring and
Yeah,
carefully
I think with the metrics that we're measuring, because there are quite a few in there, I think we're trying to be careful about how much detail we go into as well, because we can get down a rabbit hole pretty quick with the data we have.
Sure.
And so I guess my question simply was, year over year, we went from a 10 to an 8 with reporting the exact same data. So
Yeah.
again, getting back to the subjective piece, we can move on, but I assume that this will all be reconsidered post this appeal. And so I would just ask that be something to be considered is all.
Sure.
Thank you.
Thank you. The next one I wanted to make my way down to was plan has been identified to measure outputs and outcomes. Seems like we've just been saying those words a lot here. But kind of the same thing. I have a feeling it goes down the exact same path. It's a 2-point deduction year over year. But again, it seems a little bit more subjective. And so I would just, if there's any questions, we can answer those right now. Otherwise, we can move on.
So, again, I don't have anything related here except that my guess is, and let me pull it up in your application here. Oh, not there. Sorry. Could be related to youth and the completion of surveys as a means of measure, and whether or not there was specificity in terms of how it is that you ensure that youth are completing the surveys that measure both the outputs and the outcomes.
And that too is, it's kind of like the service territory promised in the application. And it also depends on match length. And so if that's the clarifying part of this, the survey that applies could depend on match length and when those occur. So for example, if a match is made at the beginning or end of a year, annually they're going to see those reviews fall. You may see a heavier back end of one year and a lighter end of Q1 of another, and vice versa. So that metric is kind of an ebb and flow. And so just making sure the committee understands how and when our surveys happen and the territory that they're happening in, namely the zip codes.
Well, let me, Brett, just to chime in on that, if their reporting is simply that the youth in every pair gets surveyed for feedback from the program at X point along the way, and we interviewed you know, we gathered them and this is what we got, it wouldn't maybe get balled up in whatever match link is in people's different annual cycles, right? One of the challenges that every agency has to figure out how to package that and report it in a kind of more generic way. Does that make sense? And I'm trying to actively
Yes.
listen because but it sounded like you had people on different cycles. But the issue, if the goal of this is to make sure that everybody gets invited to give some feedback and that it's the youth, not their parents or not somebody on behalf of them, then that somehow displaying that am I
Yeah.
catching some of that?
Yeah.
Okay. Does that make sense?
Yep.
Okay.
Yep. And I figured that one's a little bit more clear than the prior question, and then we'll move on to, this one is probably the bigger one of what we have here today. Has achieved outputs or outcomes on prior grants per meaningful measures, 10 out of 20, so that's a 10-point deduction year over year. I have a feeling what it is, but I'd like to hear what the committee's thoughts were on it, so I just don't ramble on about things that don't apply.
So my guess is it's 50% of the goals of the outcomes and outputs are met. I need to pull that up. So the first output anticipated 100, the actual was 61, so that one would not be met.
Can you specify what that number was again?
Yeah, so you have Candaceburg Brothers and Sisters anticipates that 100 youth will reach their match anniversary and complete the surveys. And the proposed is 100 and the actual is 61.
Okay.
And then the other outcome is by December 31st, 2023, 90%, and you had a 90% outcome, and you had 93% achieved, so you met that one. So you met one and didn't meet the other, so the 1 out of 2.
Okay. So it was the 61 out of the 100 for the deduction.
Correct,
I mean,
does that make sense?
mostly, I assume.
Okay.
Looking for
Yeah.
nods from the other
Yeah.
staff. We're getting nod from one of them, so just
Yeah.
making sure.
Okay.
All right.
Okay. Fair enough. If we move on to the second section, first question, organization has the resources to produce outcomes efficiently and effectively. 5 out of 10 with a comment of a huge budget surplus in 2021. Cost of service per child is very high.
Yeah, so Joyce, Juliet, or Joyce or Juliet, either one, do you want to explain so it appears that it's showing a surplus of $105,000 in '21. Am I reading this correctly, Joyce? And a surplus in '22 and a projected surplus in '23? Not nearly to that degree.
Okay, let me find it. I have like 30 things open. I'm trying to keep up.
Sure. No worries.
So while they're looking, is the understanding that because we have a large surplus, that we need less money in the future?
Yes.
That was the discussion with the review panel.
That was the discussion with the reviewers.
They said that.
So
Yes.
a couple things I'd like to add, which I think will clarify. Of the 105,000, I think 60-ish thousand of that is COVID relief. So that's revenue that will not show up again. So that's worth noting. Also, we had 2 staff gone for over 9 months, or we were 2 staff less for 9 months that very same year. And so there's a whole lot of revenue there that wasn't being paid out to staff or salaries. I don't have that exact number for you, but I can probably tell you 9 months out of 12, that's a pretty good chunk of it, probably 40-ish thousand at least. And so that gets us a little bit closer to the projected surpluses that we have in 22 and 23, which I don't think anybody would argue that a surplus for nonprofit, especially these days, is a bad thing. So that's kind of an anomaly. I wanted to point that out. If that had been reflected in every one of these projections, then I can see some concerns there for sure. In our 2023 projection, we projected, I believe, the full 25,000 of city social service grant funding. If we are awarded the 17 that we are currently receiving, that would then throw us into a negative projection. I would like to point that out.
Correct. Yeah, no, thank you. Thank you for the clarification on that piece. You did indicate about a matching gifts challenge in 21.
Yep. And those are also, we don't know when those are going to happen, so
course.
we can't really include them in a projection per se. If they happen, it's a great thing.
Sure.
We also don't know the stipulations to them as to how they apply. Some of them are, a donor will say, I want $250 donors that are brand new, and some will say, I want a $1,000 donor. It doesn't matter who it is. So
Sure.
that's a tough projection to make.
Absolutely, absolutely. And I can see the concern in terms of being able to explain that. There's some opportunity to explain that in the substantial increase or decrease in the budget. But to your point, it does put nonprofits in a difficult position when you have a budget and you have a surplus, and then there's conversation related to whether or not they need the funds moving forward.
Yeah, and if we did genuinely have that $105,000 surplus from an accounting standpoint, that rolls into a balance sheet as opposed to, it doesn't roll over year from a budgeting standpoint.
Okay,
At least I think most accountants operate that way at least.
okay. Thank you for that.
A note for us to pencil maybe to look at that question when we
Yeah.
look at, or that section in terms of clarifying for next year, maybe an opportunity for a note.
The question as it's written in the application for budget narrative.
Yeah,
We could probably clean up that language to
yeah,
encourage
thinking that,
more.
we've,
Right.
yeah.
We've
Thank
done
you.
this a couple of times, so
Mhm.
thank you for that.
Mhm. Anything else?
Past grant administration is effective was my last one. Just no comment, wanted a little clarification, and then that is all I have.
So that's scored internally by us.
Yes, you had one instance where you were late on reporting.
Okay.
So that was all.
And I think that was it.
Mhm.
And we
Okay.
follow the city's example of that moving forward, so that if there are any late pieces, it goes from a 5 to a 3 to try to have consistency moving forward from this being scored by the city to United Way. So
Okay.
we've tried to follow that to be consistent in that transition.
Yeah, I didn't have a comment, so that's helpful. Thank you.
Okay. Thank
Okay.
you.
Holly, do you have any additional questions?
Not,
No, not really. I just wanted to thank you for the opportunity to talk about our program today. Really, that's all I have.
well, thank you both.
Thank you to the committee thank you for listening to what we have to say. I guess in conclusion, we have a lot of good news to report for you guys. We've added all of our staff back that I just talked about and some, which is great. That's going to yield more kids getting exactly what they need. So we thank you guys for your consideration. We hope that, we can meet somewhere in the middle on this year's, and we'll make our improvements as we move forward on some of those areas where we weren't as clear as we maybe could have been. So thank you guys. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, just, I think people heard it in Eric's remarks, they actually are funded. His made the cut that way. It was just an issue of some specifics on the scores. Okay, that is the third of our 3 appeals. I think we can move on to the committee and see if there is any sense that we should be doing any adjustments this year. Otherwise, I would entertain a motion to affirm the recommendations from the United Way in the prior meeting and recommend them to the council. So, committee?
Chairwoman?
Yes.
I really appreciate you all, the organizations taking the time to come in and making sure that we're all using the same language to go ahead and appropriately maximize the use of these tax dollars, making sure that we, the citizens of Topeka, are really supporting the nonprofits that make us a better, healthier place. At this point, I think the clarifications have been made and improvements can be made for next year. And I am ready to move forward with the recommendation. Thank you, Chairwoman.
Is that a motion?
I would like to make the motion.
Okay. Motion would be more or less the way I phrased it before, to affirm the recommendations
And,
from the staff.
and I second that.
Okay.
And with the, kind of reminding all the organizations that we do have the ARPA money that's coming out. The applications are out right now for those, so they can look there for maybe the additional funding they might want or need.
I'll jump on and clarify that the overall intent for the ARPA money offering is for strategic investments, not for operating, but people can certainly find that information on the city's website and review it if they have some
I
possibilities. in
apologize
mind.
about that.
Okay. Do we have a motion, Liz?
Yep. Councilman Nager and Councilman Kell.
I just wanted to know if you
Oh,
got the
yes, yes.
phrasing. Okay. Okay, moved and seconded to affirm the recommendations that came from staff and the last meeting of this council and recommend them forward to council. Further discussion? All in favor say aye.
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 Aye, aye. Okay, it's 3-0 to pass them forward. Again, thank you to everyone. This is always, we hope that it's helpful for you. If there really is something that jumps out, those of you who have been around know that if there's been an error or something major, we do go back and look at that. Otherwise, we really appreciate this process. It helps our colleagues on the council be assured that we've provided all the due diligence through United Way, our vendor, as well as this committee, to invite the proposals, review them, make sure we didn't miss anything that needs to be addressed immediately, and if something comes up that we can look at for next year, we do that. And we've worked hard at this, but most of all, we appreciate all the hard work that you all do every day that makes a difference in our community. With that, we planned to have a special meeting this year for this committee prior to going into our looking at the process and priorities and so on for next year, to do kind of a deep dive into what the picture looks like in the whole community. We need to set a date for that. We talked about getting it fixed before we got here, but we failed to do that somehow. So Brett, maybe you could report to us anything that you know of in terms of status or that would make a difference in waiting a little bit to have this meeting or getting right on it.
Thank you, Chairwoman. I think we could do it either way. Probably August would be helpful, just to give us a few more weeks. We've got some internal things we're working on with the big board meeting coming up, but if we could go to August, that would be helpful.
I think even September,
Okay.
is
September
okay
would be
for
even
us.
better.
And so not wanting to rush you, just wanting to get it set.
Yeah, yes. September would be even better, and I can work with Liz on that and then work with the committee. We can get that and then get it out to the community.
September sound okay to committee members? Any particular time
Yeah.
that's not good that you can just speak up right now for September?
I don't think I can do the last week.
Okay,
September. That's it.
good to know. Councilman Kell?
No, I was about to say September's a lot better than August for me, so.
Okay, perfect.
September, anything but the last week, we'll work on it from there. Excellent. Any other business for today? Vendor, committee members? I'll invite any public comment from the committee. Is there any, or from the other viewers than agencies? Anybody else have any comments for us before we break? Hearing none, we are adjourned. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you. I do have the results from